hopefully those in the room can delay the McCormick Marathon just a few more minutes, because I think what we're going to hear is the exclamation point at the end of what was a very long sentence here with our guest speaker, Brandi Benson. Brandi, if you could come on up. One thing to note, Brandi, if you're inspired as I expect you will, Brandi has 25 of her books that she's willing to talk to you and sign just outside the doors after she concludes her presentation. So warm welcome to Brandi Benson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before we start, I do want to just say thank you to the healthcare professionals that are in here, the cancer patients, the survivors, the caregivers, and those who are dedicating their lives to sarcoma research. Thank you so much. Today, I stand before you not only as a cancer survivor, but somebody whose life was deeply affected by sarcoma, and people who didn't give up on me when the statistics suggested otherwise. My journey literally begins the day that I swapped out my M16 for a gun-gray chemotherapy pole and clear vomit bags, as I laid in the fetal position in my hospital bed with clumps of hair scattered all over my pillowcase, as cancer and its treatments raged war in my veins. But to start and understand how I got here, we have to start at the very beginning. In the early 2000s, I moved from California to Hawaii, which was really amazing. And this is where my parents ended up getting a divorce. My stepfather decided he no longer wanted to be married to my mother. So he left my mother with 2 kids, 2 girls in high school, and all of the bills, and 3 big dogs as well. So during this time, we were financially strapped, of course. And I just remember hearing my mother cry constantly, pleading to God, ask God, how am I going to do this? How am I going to provide for my daughters? And I knew that she felt alone, and that really just made me feel terrible. So I decided the next time that I heard her, I would come into the room and kind of console her. So that's exactly what I did. I walked into the room, I picked her up off the ground, and I told her that everything was going to be fine. And that as long as we had each other, we were each other's resiliency, and we were going to get through this together. Now, I was there for my mother emotionally, but financially, we still struggled. I ended up taking this conversation to my best friend in high school and just talked about what was going on, what we were going through. Financially, we didn't have any money. The cupboards were bare. The dogs were starving. We were really struggling. And she would take this information and she would share it with her father, who was a very high-ranking individual in the military. And a couple of days later, we get a knock on the door. I open up the door, and to my amazement, there are soldiers that I've never recognized. I don't know who they are, but they're standing all outside of my door with boxes, huge boxes. And I'd later find out that these boxes were MREs. And these are for those people who aren't very savvy with the military, but these are meals ready to eat. It's basically deployment food that you would take when you're on deployment or on a tour or a mission. So now we had boxes of food that we could survive on, and the major necessities to living was feeding us and eating. We had that taken care of for the next 8 to 6 months. So a seed was planted in my mind and my sister's mind that one day we should probably join the military, because look what they do. They provide to families they don't even know. I want to be a part of something bigger than myself, something amazing like the military. So a couple of years later, maybe 3 years or something, my sister and I decided that we were going to do that. We wanted to give back to an organization that literally put food on our table and saved my family. So in 2007, my sister would join the Army after having her son. And then I would join in 2008 after dropping out of college. Not too proud about that, but that's what I did. Dropped out of college to swap out my textbooks for now a bulletproof vest. Now, my mother thought this was a terrible idea, mainly because we're joining during a time of war, and she doesn't want both of her daughters getting deployed at the same time. So I remember telling my mom, don't worry about that. Everything's going to be fine. The military wouldn't do something like that. They're not going to deploy 2 siblings in the same household at the same time. I don't know about that. I feel like mothers specifically have a spidey sense, I think, right? Because that's exactly what ended up happening. We both got deployed. And I didn't deploy to just any place. I got deployed to a red zone where there were bombs flying out of the night sky, rocking our bases, where there was the alarm going off constantly because there was an enemy trying to get into our base and commit a suicidal attack. I was at the worst of the worst fobs, and all I wanted was financial stability and to feel safe. I never again wanted to have to choose between pharmaceutical medication or having food on the table. So my mother knew why we joined, but we ended up getting deployed. So just when I think that things couldn't get any worse, I had an enemy that was so lethal, so stealthy inside of my own body that not even the most trained sniper could have seen it from a mile away. I had something in about 2008 timeframe. I had a lump in my leg. When I was kind of working on it, but I discovered it. And I was sent from my original fob, which was Diwania. It's 187 miles south of Baghdad, to Baghdad to get a CT scan. And then I was sent to Landstuhl, Germany to get an MRI. And that's when I discovered that this lump in my leg, it was a tumor. This is the day that my life changed forever. I can remember it like it was yesterday. So I didn't get diagnosed with any type of tumor, of course, right? I had something called Ewing sarcoma. I was told that this cancer had great potential to spread to my lungs, to my spinal cord, and to my brainstem. I endured over 101 rounds of chemotherapy in 10 months. I had 12 blood transfusions. I had 5 leg surgeries and endless hours of physical therapy because I had to learn how to walk again. And the conclusion was that they weren't sure if I was going to make it past 5 years. Now, I know in medicine, part of the hardest part of your job is delivering this bad news to your patients. By a show of hands, how many of you dread walking into that hospital room giving your patient bad news? Yeah, seems like a lot of you, right? Hi, Gina. So that's exactly what happened. I was, of course, extremely scared about what was going on, and receiving this news was nothing that was great for me. I was extremely terrified. But giving that bad news to your patients, yes, I feel like it's a hard part of your day, right? That moment is extremely hard for your day. But for the patient, they are constantly trying to survive that moment, because in that single second, in that moment that you deliver that information, you change their entire life for the trajectory of however long their time is still with them. So when I was initially diagnosed with this cancer, I was in constant contact with my mother. And of course, sharing information like this was extremely hard because I didn't want to make the situation even harder than what she was already going through. But the conversation ended with my mother telling me that she was leaving everything behind in Texas. Her friends, her family, the house, and her job. She was taking everything, bringing my nephew to come stay with me in the hospital. And my nephew was in his terrible twos, which is also pretty hard. But we have to remember the breadth of this situation here. So my sister is still deployed in Iraq. So one daughter is still in Iraq, and the other one has just come back with a rare and aggressive cancer. And I remember when I first saw my mother, I collapsed in her arms, and I just began crying profusely. And I remember asking her, how am I going to make it? How am I going to survive this? How am I going to live? The prognosis is so bad. And she immediately shushed me and told me everything was going to be okay. And that as long that we had each other, we were going to be fine because we were each other's resiliency. And then my mind shoots immediately back a few years ago when it was me helping her during her hardest part of her life, which was her divorce. So all I kept hearing during this time was that we were gonna, some really things were gonna be happening, some bad news. They were just sure that I was gonna be passing away. So at the age of 24 years old, I was updating my will, making sure that all of my affairs were gonna go into the right places and to the right things in the event that I did pass away. And during this time, I was extremely depressed. And I was not only just mentally bogged down, but physically, I was exhausted because I had to do so much treatment. And I remember at one point that I was so weak that I had to get pushed around in a wheelchair full time. And it was at my 14th cycle that I came to my team and I asked them, I said, hey, I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I'm mentally broken down. I don't think I can do this anymore. Do you think it's okay that I stop at this 14th cycle and not continue on with my 17? And they told me no, that I had to continue the 17 cycles. So my mom is seeing this, what's going on, and she decides to do the unthinkable, which is what I believe today is the reason why I'm here. She creates a sign that says, do not enter unless you're feeding her, taking her vitals, or giving her medication. And she would place the sign on the front of my door in my hospital room. Now, what this did was it kind of controlled the narrative of what was coming in and out of the room and what we were hearing. So she'd walk back over to the bed, and she sat down as I was gripping my hand on that gun gray chemotherapy pole, clear vomit back to my lips, clumps of hair scattered all over my pillowcase. And she told me this life-altering pep talk. She said, Brandi, I know the prognosis is not great. I know the statistics are stacked up against us. And she always said us. But she said, I believe in you. There are miracles every single day. Why can't you be one of them? And it was at that second that I decided I didn't want to be a memory told off my mother's lips, that I had to change my thoughts and my process of what I was experiencing, and that it was time to believe in a miracle. On the days that we felt strong enough and I felt okay, we dared to dream so big, and we had some outrageous dreams. I dreamed of being on the Oprah show and telling my story. I had dreams of publishing a book and sharing it as a memoir, talking on big stages like this, becoming an advocate, a global advocate, but sharing my story nonetheless with people. And today, I'm very proud to say that I became a published author. I've become a global cancer advocate and speaker, sharing my story of hope and resiliency with organizations such as SARC. I sit on the board of director for the Sarcoma Alliance. I've served as a distinguished consumer reviewer for the Department of Defense, or Department of War, I think somebody said that, for the PRCRP. I work alongside of pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, and healthcare organizations providing the patient perspective. And one of the organizations that I do want to kind of bring a little bit to light that I'm extremely proud that I'm a part of is the Sarcoma Alliance. Organizations like the Sarcoma Alliance ensure that no patient has to navigate sarcoma alone through education, support, and community. And what we're really known for is our second opinion grant. That is absolutely amazing. We would love to talk to you about that if there is any time. Another one I do want to bring up is organizations such as SARC. And the collaboration that's happening right now in rooms like this is driving progress in the sarcoma research space, clinical trials, and patient care. Because every patient deserves access to knowledge, specialists, treatment options, and hope. Because when a patient hears you have sarcoma, they should never hear, we don't know where to send you, or we don't have any treatments to give you. I believe that there are statistics, but behind every statistic, every number, there is a person, there is a family, there's a life that's trying to be lived and fought for. I believe in miracles. And I believe that miracles happen every single day. Thank you so much for having me.